Herbert Joseph Thomas was born in Columbus, Ohio on February 8, 1918, but was raised in South Charleston. He went to Virginia Tech on a football scholarship and is in the Virginia Tech Sports Hall of Fame. He left Virginia Tech 2 months short of graduation to join the Army Air Corps, but transferred to the Marines because many of his friends were in that branch of service. He served as a sergeant in the 3rd Marines, 3rd Marine Division. Thomas was awarded the Medal of Honor for action on November 7, 1943 at Coramakina River, Bougainville Island, Solomon Islands. He was killed in action. His citation reads in part, although several of his men were struck by enemy bullets as he led his squad through dense jungle undergrowth in the face of severe hostile machine gun fire, Sergeant Thomas and his group fearlessly pressed forward into the center of the Japanese position and destroyed the crews of 2 machine guns by accurate rifle fire and grenades. Discovering a 3rd gun more difficult to approach, he carefully placed his men closely around him in strategic positions from which they were to charge after he had thrown a grenade into the emplacement. When the grenade struck vines and fell back into the midst of the group, Sergeant Thomas deliberately flung himself upon it to smother the explosion, valiantly sacrificing his life for his comrades. Would any of us have the bravery to make a sacrifice like that? Herbert Joseph Thomas, a true American hero. Let's don't forget him. And you know, in West Virginia there must be 10,000 cemeteries or more, and we've only got 44 Medals of Honor accredited to our state. But incredibly, 2 of them are buried here at Sunset Memorial Park. The other one, his name is Darwin Keith Kyle. And here he is, Darwin Keith Kyle. And he was awarded the Medal of Honor for his service during the Korean War. Here's his story. Korean Medal of Honor recipient Darwin Keith Kyle was born June 1, 1921. He fought in World War II and earned the Silver Star for bravery. As a 2nd lieutenant in Company K, 7th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, he was killed on February 16, 1951 near Kamil-ni, Korea. His citation reads in part, 2nd Lieutenant Kyle immediately charged the hostile emplacement alone, engaged the enemy crew in hand-to-hand combat, killing all 3. Continuing on toward the objective, his platoon suddenly received an intense automatic weapons fire from a well-concealed hostile position on its right flank. Again leading his men in a daring bayonet charge against this position, firing his carbine and throwing grenades, 2nd Lieutenant Kyle personally destroyed 4 of the enemy before he was killed by a burst from an enemy submachine gun. Darwin Keith Kyle, a hero from a conflict known as the Forgotten War. Darwin Keith Kyle and Herbert Joseph Thomas, 2 Medal of Honor winners, 2 separate wars, both buried in the same cemetery in South Charleston, West Virginia. Let's don't forget their sacrifice. Now, we've got one more person to see here at Sunset Memorial Park, and he's on the other side of the cemetery, so I'll see you over there in just a second. This is our last stop at Sunset Memorial Park. The man's name is William Gustavus Conley. And if you've never heard of him, he was the 18th governor of West Virginia. And he could be called the comeback kid in West Virginia politics because in 1912, he ran for Congress and lost by 14 votes. But in 1928, he came back and ran for governor and won. And he served from 1929 to 1933. And he also oversaw the dedication of that beautiful Capitol building we have on Kanawha Boulevard, one of the prettiest in the country. William Gustavus Conley. I don't even think anybody knows his stone is here. They just drive right by him every day. But he was the governor of West Virginia. Just wanted you to know he was here. And that does it for Sunset Memorial Park. I'm heading to Dunbar. This is the Donald C. Kennard Memorial State Veterans Cemetery. And while we're going to see the cemetery because it is something to see, I think we need to know about the man behind the name, Donald C. Kennard. Donald C. Kennard was born in Logan, West Virginia in 1935. He served in the military for 22 years, serving 7 tours of duty in Vietnam, and later left the Marines to become one of the first Navy SEALs. During his service, Donald Kennard received 7 Purple Hearts and the Bronze Star. He was also awarded the Navy Cross, the highest medal for that branch of the U.S. Armed Forces. Here's an example of his bravery. When his unit was subjected to intense enemy rocket, machine gun, and automatic weapons fire, Chief Petty Officer Kennard was wounded in the arms and legs by shrapnel from an enemy hand grenade. He immediately hurled several hand grenades across the canal into enemy positions. During the ensuing battle, he was suddenly attacked by one of the enemy who had crept up behind him. After several minutes of fierce hand-to-hand struggle, Chief Petty Officer Kennard succeeded in overcoming and killing his attacker, who was later identified as a North Vietnamese Army lieutenant. He worked tirelessly for veterans to have a southern West Virginia resting place and worked for many years on the West Virginia Veterans Cemetery Committee. He passed away in 2009. Fittingly, this American hero is the first veteran buried at the Donald C. Kennard Memorial State Veterans Cemetery. Donald C. Kennard. This is the other end of the cemetery, and now that you know about Donald C. Kennard, take a look at his legacy. This is one awesome place. Donald C. Kennard, 7-time Purple Heart winner. And you know, when you look at a place like this, it's appropriate that it's named for a hero like that. Let you and I remember him too. Now, let's head to St. Albans and further back into the past. This is the Taze Hill Cemetery in St. Albans, and it's the final resting place of many of the early families that came into this area. And when you think about those pioneers, think of the hardship, the Indian battles, the danger that they faced coming into an area that had nothing. How many stories must be here waiting to be found? I've only scratched the surface, but I've picked out a few obscurely famous stories of my own. Take a look. Here is a quick view of Taze Hill, but only a fraction of the beauty that's here. This is a view of St. Albans. Imagine what it looked like 100 years ago. These two graves belong to Stephen and Mary Carroll Taze, the first permanent settlers along the Coal River in 1793. Stephen inherited 4,000 acres from his father Thomas for his efforts in the French and Indian War, hence the name, Taze Valley. In one spot, there are 7 Confederate memorial markers. They are here to honor those young men who left Cole's Mouth, or St. Albans, and never returned. Their actual burial locations are unknown. There are, however, 34 Confederate and 10 Union soldiers buried here. This is a witness tree, estimated at 240 years old. It has seen a soldier from every war since the War of 1812 to the Gulf War, buried here at Taze Hill Cemetery. Here is a Native American mound. Could be the Adena culture, 1000 BC to 100 AD, or the Middle Woodland culture, 100 AD to 500 AD. Both were active in the area, and both built mounds, but it's never been investigated. And finally, how many of you from the St. Albans area know about the Chilton House? Well, William Edwin Chilton is buried here at Taze Hill. He was prosecuting attorney for Kanawha County, Secretary of State for West Virginia, and a U.S. Senator from 1911 to 1917. Not a bad record for one lifetime. Taze Hill Cemetery. And if you're looking for history in this area, this is the place to come. But you know, it's also a beautiful place just to take a walk. So come and see it. Now, we've got one more place to see in St. Albans. And while Taze Hill Cemetery is a tough act to follow, they can hold their own too. This is the Bangor Cemetery in St. Albans, and it's a perfect example of how quickly cemeteries can decay. This area is so old as far as population that George Washington actually owned this land. I'm going to take you on a short virtual tour just to show you how quickly it can all go away. If not for the Boy Scouts and the Episcopal Church, it might already be lost. Before I give you a brief history of the Bangor Cemetery, take a look at these markers. Imagine their beauty and the care and the work that went into creating and carving these stones. Many are already lost, and others are beyond repair. The Bangor Cemetery, also called the Highland Cemetery, also called the Hudson Cemetery or the Episcopal Cemetery, is located at the intersection of Kanawha Terrace and South Walnut Street in St. Albans. According to some local history, this land was once owned by George Washington. George Washington's nephew and great-nephew are supposedly buried here, but the stones are long gone. Many graves are visible only by sunken areas, and some are gone completely. The slave portion was located farther up the hill on the east side of what is now the 800 block of South Walnut Street. The local St. Mark's Episcopal Church is now trying to restore and protect the old cemetery, but without their efforts, it will be lost forever and a part of our history with it. The Bangor Cemetery, home to some of George Washington's relatives, but at least it's in the process of being saved, because without help, it'll be gone forever. And if you want to see history, feel history, this is the place to come. And that does it for Kanawha County Part 1. I hope you'll join us for Part 2, because we've got a lot more to see. But in the meantime, I'll keep looking, and you'll keep looking. I'll see you then. A couple of things before I go, and this has never ever happened before at Obscurely Famous. A clarification and an update. I'll start with the clarification. If you saw my Mason County show, there was a segment on Howard Chester West, who was a Medal of Honor winner from World War I. Several sources, however, list him as Chester Howard West, but I listed him as Howard Chester West because that's the name on his death certificate. I thought that was the most accurate record. What I should have done was clarify that it's listed both ways. I'll do better next time. And now for the update. Incredibly, it's about the same person, Howard Chester West, or Chester Howard West. A veterans group contacted me, and they're trying to raise funds to move him out of the Van Sickle Cemetery in the Cornstalk Reserve into a perpetual care veterans cemetery. So maybe we're having an effect. It's awesome. I'll see you. If you would like a copy of this video, please send your check or money order for $19.95 plus $5 shipping and handling to West Virginia Public Broadcasting, Viewer Services, 600 Capitol Street, Charleston, West Virginia, 25301, or call 1-3 304-556-4900. Ask for viewer services. Or email jack@obscurelyfamous.net or jackcrutchfield7@gmail.com.